Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a historical contrast, so vivid, it still really shapes how we understand leadership. We're looking at the lives of two Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius and Nero.
Right.
On the surface, both commanded immense power, but their reigns, their characters, their ultimate legacies couldn't be more different.
Pulls apart, really.
We've gathered quite a stack of sources that compare these two titans, and our mission for this deep dive is to uncover something maybe a little startling. It's this idea that Stoicism, the very philosophy you might think would strengthen leadership, was actually seen as a radical threat to Roman power.
Which is fascinating in itself.
Yeah, and how that clash might reveal something about the true cost of, well, unchecked freedom. Even for us today, we'll be exploring how philosophy, mentorship, crucial personal choices sculpted these leaders, and what their stories can tell us about power, virtue, and human nature in our world.
And what's really interesting here, I think, is that we're looking at more than just historical figures. They're almost archetypes, aren't they? They resonate across time. And central to one of them is Stoicism, which, in simple terms, is about finding inner peace and virtue by focusing on what you can control.
Right, and accepting what you can't.
Exactly. So one represents the philosopher king, the ideal maybe, and the other, well, a cautionary tale of absolute power just unleashed. You'll see how their paths diverge so drastically, and importantly, why that matters to us even now.
Okay, let's jump straight into this core difference then, because it's pretty stark. We have Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, who seems to be, clinging to moral principles even under the most intense pressures of running an empire.
There's tremendous pressure.
And then there's Nero. When he's given truly unchecked freedom, it looks like he just collapses almost instantly
Yeah, spirals downward.
into self-indulgence, paranoia, violence. It's like night and day.
It really is. And it raises that big question.
Yeah.
How did two men, and neither of whom was born expecting the throne,
Right, neither was the obvious heir initially.
how did they end up on such radically different paths? And our sources seem to suggest it's a potent mix, mentorship, upbringing, and then just key personal choices they made along the way. Marcus Aurelius really stands out as the anti-Nero, doesn't he? A leader defined by restraint, humility, deep self-reflection, versus Nero's terrifying slide into tyranny. And that's the dynamic we need to explore. It's maybe less about where they started and more about the forces that shaped them.
So it's not just the power itself then, it's more about how they were prepared, or maybe completely unprepared, to actually handle it. What specific things do our sources point to about how Marcus and Nero were, say, schooled in power or maybe left wanting?
That's a good way to put it. How were they schooled?
Yeah. We often picture philosophers as these, isolated thinkers, deep in their studies, writing away, far from the messy real world. But do our sources challenge that idea? How do they frame philosophy as needing to be, well, in the arena, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely. The material really emphasizes that. Philosophers shouldn't just write about virtue. They have to act on it. They need to engage. We see this with Plato, for instance. He famously got involved, risked getting involved with rulers in Syracuse.
Right, a risky move.
A very risky move. And he did it precisely to avoid that accusation of being, all talk. He got that ideas have to be tested. They have to grapple with the complexities, the compromises of the real world. Otherwise, they're just abstractions. Nice ideas, but untested.
But that leads to the danger, doesn't it? Our sources really highlight the immense peril philosophers face when they did try to engage with power. Seneca, Nero's advisor, is just such a tragic example here.
He really is.
He clearly wanted to influence Nero,
Yeah.
right? To guide him towards being a better ruler, a better person. But by staying too long in that inner circle, he ended up, well, deeply compromised.
Utterly compromised.
So, is it almost inevitable? If you're a philosopher trying to influence a tyrant, are you basically doomed to be compromised? Or do the sources give us any hope for, successful engagement without losing yourself?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And honestly, the sources lean pretty heavily towards the grim reality of compromise. Seneca's story really illustrates this profound, almost insidious risk. Entering the halls of power as a philosopher, it seems, often means risking your own corruption. It reminds me of that line from Sophocles that Pompey quoted, which our sources bring up: "Whoever makes his journey to a tyrant's court becomes his slave, although he went there a free man."
Wow, that's stark.
It is. And Seneca's efforts with Nero, however noble they might have started out, They just slowly eroded his integrity. It really shows how even the best intentions can be undone by getting too close to absolute unchecked power. It's like that
A
metaphor.
frog in boiling water.
Exactly, like the frog in water that's slowly heating up. It becomes very, very difficult to know when it's time to jump out before it's too late.
You mentioned how philosophy can be disruptive, and I found it genuinely fascinating to learn that Stoicism, which we often associate with, like calm and reason,
Inner peace, resilience.
yeah, that it was actually banished at one point,
Yeah.
seen as a direct threat to the emperor's authority.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Why would a philosophy be considered dangerous?
Exactly.
Well, true philosophy, as our sources explain it, is inherently disruptive. It has to be. It challenges the status quo. When it gets too comfortable, too domesticated, maybe toothless, it loses its essence.
Right.
And Epictetus, a really prominent Stoic philosopher, he was famously banished from Rome under Emperor Domitian for exactly this reason. His teachings emphasized inner freedom, moral autonomy, this core idea that your own mind, your own choices are the only things truly within your control. Now, for an emperor demanding absolute external control over everything and everyone,
Yeah, it sounds like a problem.
it's a direct challenge because it cultivates this spirit of independence, this inner resilience that you just can't easily suppress or command.
So what's the modern resonance here? It suggests that powerful ideas, when people actually live them out, can definitely be seen as a threat by those wanting to maintain rigid control. It's not just an ancient problem, is it?
Not at all.
You can think of any number of movements today that challenge established norms and, well, you see how they're sometimes met with resistance or even suppression.
It's a recurring pattern, unfortunately.
Now, thinking about ancient Rome, we sometimes romanticize it, don't we? This stable, golden past, all marble and grandeur.
Hollywood version.
Exactly. But our sources paint a very different picture. They reveal that antiquity was actually incredibly unstable, dangerous, and often just filled with this baseline level of existential dread.
Indeed. Yeah, that golden, stable past idea, it's largely a myth. Times were incredibly precarious. Think about it. Wars could just erase entire cities off the map. Citizens could be enslaved en masse after a defeat.
Whole populations.
Yeah, whole male populations could be wiped out in a single bad conflict. This ever-present shadow of sudden arbitrary catastrophe.
Yeah.
It's a crucial detail. You have to understand that. Understand their mindset. They lived with this constant awareness of how easily everything could just be lost.
What's really striking, though, is how closely that ancient anxiety seems to mirror our own modern worries.
It does, doesn't it?
Like our anxieties today about recessions or climate change, geopolitical instability, maybe even societal collapse. The ancients lived under a similar pervasive cloud of uncertainty. The specific threats obviously change, but that feeling itself, that underlying instability, it feels very much like a human constant.
That's absolutely right. And this human constant of fear and instability, it helps explain why philosophy became so central, not just as an intellectual debate, but for survival. It wasn't just an academic pursuit for the elite few. It was a practical toolkit, a way to navigate a profoundly unpredictable world. It was about finding inner resilience, maintaining your composure, when external stability was just non-existent, or at least elusive.
Right.
Imagine living every day knowing a single bad harvest or, I don't know, a misplaced diplomatic insult could literally wipe out your entire community.
Yeah, hard to fathom.
Philosophy offered a kind of mental fortress against that constant background radiation of fear. And this might resonate with you, thinking about how we seek meaning and guidance in our own turbulent times, even if the specific threats look different on the surface.
Given all that profound instability, the role of guidance, mentors, family enemies seems absolutely critical.
Hugely important.
And our sources strongly suggest this might have been the crucial swing vote, as they put it, that pushed Marcus towards virtue and Nero towards, well, depravity. How specifically did those early influences look so different for them?
Well, what's fascinating is just how stark the difference was. Marcus Aurelius, on the one hand, he benefited from incredibly strong positive role models. His mother gave him a clear, consistent moral example. And his adoptive father, the Emperor Antoninus Pius, modeled virtue, patience, diligent leadership. Just solid qualities.
That's good foundation.
A really stable ethical foundation. It seems like it ingrained in him a deep sense of duty and self-restraint from early on.
Okay, and Nero.
Nero's upbringing, by contrast, was just tragically fractured and frankly toxic.
Toxic how?
While his mother, Agrippina, manipulative, ruthlessly ambitious, constantly vying for power, and basically using Nero as a pawn in her games.
Totally.
And his sort of surrogate father figure, Seneca, brilliant philosopher, yes, but he seemed to lack that paternal warmth, that consistent moral guidance a young person needs. So the sources really suggest this profound difference in parental and mentorship guidance. Having truly ethical anchors versus growing up in an environment of manipulation and compromise that might have been the decisive factor.
The swing vote?
The swing vote that pushed Marcus towards stability and, well, sent Nero spiraling towards chaos.
It really makes you pause, doesn't it? Thinking about the profound impact of those formative years.
Absolutely.
The difference between a steady guiding hand and one that's fractured or self-serving. It almost feels like a blueprint for how a leader is made, or maybe unmade.
It really does. Nature versus nurture, but with incredibly high stakes.
So after exploring these two emperors, our sources pose this rather provocative question. Is power itself? Is it a kind of mental illness?
Ooh, that's a strong way to put it.
Well, you look at Nero. Given absolute freedom, the freedom to kill his own mother without consequence, and his instability just accelerated, didn't it?
It certainly seems that way. And it raises that important question about the inherent nature of power, especially when it's completely unchecked. Nero's path really suggests that without any kind of internal moral compass or strong external checks, absolute power can profoundly corrupt and destabilize a person. That freedom to act without a moral framework, especially when you're a leader, it just seems to rapidly devolve into the freedom to destroy. And then you have the stark contrast. Marcus Aurelius, grounded deeply in Stoic principles, he actively resisted that corruption. He had the same absolute power, faced immense pressures, but he chose a profoundly different path. And that path was paved with intentional self-discipline.
So going back to Seneca in that context, it wasn't just like being a frog unaware the water was boiling. It sounds more like a slow, insidious poisoning.
That's a good analogy, too.
Like he thought he could manage the poison, maybe even neutralize it from the inside, but instead it just seeped into him over time.
Yep.
Is it always so absolute, though? Do our sources mention any historical figures who managed to stay close to a tyrant and actually exert a truly positive, uncorrupted influence? Or is Seneca the rule?
The sources don't offer many optimistic examples there of philosophers successfully navigating a tyrant's court without significant compromise or, frankly, eventual downfall. Seneca's story is held up precisely as a cautionary tale. It highlights the blinding effects of getting too close to that kind of unchecked power, and the gradual nature of the corruption makes it all the more dangerous, doesn't it? It's rarely an overnight thing. It's a slow erosion of principles,
Right.
which makes it almost impossible to recognize when the environment has just become too toxic to stay in. That inability to extract oneself, to see clearly when you're in too deep, that's a powerful lesson in itself.
Okay, let's try and draw these threads together one last time. What are the broader, maybe even surprising lessons we can take away from these two emperors? And from the role philosophy played, or I guess failed to play in their lives?
Well, I think this deep dive leaves us with several really critical insights. First, it just underscores how philosophy and politics is always precarious. It's a dangerous game. That temptation to try and do good by staying close to power, it often leads to compromise or even ruin. It's a real tightrope walk, and the stakes are incredibly high.
Okay, point one, precariousness.
Second, Marcus Aurelius is proof that philosophy, particularly Stoicism, can guide a ruler towards greatness. It can ground them in virtue, in self-restraint. It shows that self-mastery is really key to ruling others well.
So it is possible but difficult.
Exactly. And then third, Nero's story. It isn't just a lurid tale of depravity. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that the freedom to act without a moral framework, especially for a leader, it rapidly devolves into the freedom to destroy. It proves, maybe, that true liberty actually requires profound internal discipline. Unchecked freedom isn't really freedom at all, in a way.
It's a really timeless reflection, isn't it? On the dangers of that unchecked freedom, the enduring importance of grounding leadership in virtue, but also, maybe, the real perils of trying to impose virtue from within the structures of tyranny itself.
Well said. It's complicated.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into this fascinating and, frankly, sometimes chilling contrast between Marcus Aurelius and Nero. What stands out most to you from their stories as you reflect on them now?
I think it's seeing so clearly how that internal fortitude or lack thereof, combined with external guidance or its absence, how those things can steer a leader towards greatness or allow them to just descend into tyranny. Their legacies, they aren't just ancient history collecting dust. They offer really profound lessons on leadership, on morality, and just the sheer human capacity for both immense good and Honestly, terrifying ill. It's a powerful reminder that character, not just circumstance, often shapes destiny.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? As you reflect on these two emperors, maybe consider this provocative thought. In a world where personal power, influence, and maybe increasingly these kinds of unchecked freedoms seem more accessible than ever before, how do you cultivate your own inner Marcus Aurelius? How do you navigate the potential corruptions and temptations of modern life, big or small?
Hmm, something to think about.
Definitely. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this exploration has given you plenty to think about. Until next time, keep digging deeper.